right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's live stream with Peak and Los Alamos Mountaineers. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone's aware that the presentation is being recorded. I'm Beth Courtwright. I'm the operations manager here at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEAK, in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's talk. We want to acknowledge our wonderful members and our donors and our partners like the Mountaineers for all of their generous support. For details about other PEAK programs, you can visit peaknature.org. Just a few logistics for the presentation before we get started. Our presenter will be taking questions via Zoom chat and from our in-person audience. For those of you watching from home, you can find that chat feature in the Zoom menu bar. Type your questions to the one that says Peak Moderator in the chat window anytime during the talk, and I will read them during the Q&A at the end. Please remember that we can't have everyone in the room with us here with a microphone, so there may be a delay when we're listening to those questions, but we'll be back on in just a second, and our presenter will repeat the question for everyone to hear. After the talk, you'll get a short evaluation form in your email. Please do take a moment to fill that out. Your input really helps us to improve our future programs. And now I'll pass it over to Evan to start the Mountaineers meeting.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome to the February Los Alamos Mountaineers monthly meeting. Zach is doing something here. Today we're going to have a presentation that will be at the end of our business part of the meeting. We'd like to do a short presentation. We do a financial review every year just to make sure that our books are being kept correctly and the money's being spent correctly. And so Ben Morrow is going to walk us through just a short presentation on that. Ben?
Great. This will be the first time I've seen this slide, so So together with John Berg and David Meyerhofer, we completed the financial review for 2024. If you don't read any of the things on the slide, the important takeaway is that everything seemed fine. Like all the money's there. The club itself had a pretty healthy outlook financially. You can see the membership dues in excess of $3,000 with some other revenues, mostly from a scholarship fund. In terms of total expenses, most of the money went towards the sorts of things that the club does, trips and other events like this one. The biggest outlay was the climbing school, but that's really just a pass-through to the company up near Taos, and so it looks really big and scary on the ledger, but it was a break-even event and didn't really make or lose any money. We basically found that everything was fine, so I guess I can leave it with that. If there are other questions, yeah.
So I thank you and the rest of the committee for your effort.
Oh, yeah. No problem.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, we do this every year, and we get 3 people to be on the committee, and they look at the books, and it's always gone pretty smoothly. So let me go back to the agenda here. So that was our financial review, and next we'll do a safety minute by Jan, and we do a safety minute from time to time because that's in our charter. That's one of our missions, to promote safety.
Thank you, Evan. Oh, almost there. Okay, so I want to share an event which happened to me a couple of weeks ago. We were climbing in Diablo Canyon with a bunch of friends. I'm balancing my climber, and the climber climbing next to us stepped on a loose rock. The rock fell down like next to me, right? I think nothing happened. I'm balancing my climber down, and I look at the rope, and I see some white fluffy stuff on the rope. And what happened is, so this is where I cut off the rope, right? But this is where a rock fell on a rope and managed to cut my rope in two parts. So what we ended up doing is actually, my climber was pretty low above the ground, so he was able to safely down climb the several feet to the ground, while, you know, this rope would probably hold him, but certainly we don't want to climb on such ropes. And I think the takeaway is, you know, be cautious while you are bowling someone, and always check your ropes, because this kind of damage can happen really from a falling rock. And I'm sure no one of us wants to climb on this. Okay, Sylvie.
Thanks for that, Jan. Next on the agenda is a review of our trips. Since our last meeting in January, we had 2 trips. Michael Altair took 3 people to the Brazos Overlook. I didn't have a photo from you, so I stole one from the web. Disclaimer, it's pretty. And the other trip was Zach with the Los Alamos Mountaineers / Peak trip to Las Conchas, snowshoe and cross country, sort of, Zach? With microspikes. So those were the 2 trips we've had since our last meeting. Before I go to the next future trip, I'd like to recognize Linda. Linda, come over here, please. I know, surprise. We want to thank Linda for being our very, very faithful Peak volunteer every time we're here having a mountaineer meeting. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. It's fun to be here, she says. Thank you. She checks us in and she's here for us every month. Thank you very much. Go, Linda. All right. Future trips. So March 1, and this trip by Dan is full rappel at Parito Gorge in White Rock. And then we have 2 rock climbing knots class here at Peak on March 11 and 18. And I don't think those are full. Do you know, Zach? Does anyone, any of the board knows? I think there's still room for these 2 knots classes here at Peak. If you want to register for these 2 classes, you do it through the Peak website. Thank you, Peak. Evan Rose on Cabazon Peak, April 12th. Is that full? Not full. All right, sign up for the Cabazon Peak on April 12th. Bill Podorsky on May 1 through the 9 has another llama trip. I think there's 1 spot left. Did I get that correctly? Maybe. All right, yeah. It might just have gotten taken, but check with Bill between now and then if you're interested. All right. And then our star of the year, Tanya, has just posted 3 trips. July 2 or 3 departure to the 6th for a backpack from Wolf Creek Pass to Cumbres on the CDT. That should be a go with the amount of snow we're having now. So contact Tanya Pietrus. You can see the advertisement on our website, on the Mountaineers website, and her contact information there. In August, she'll go to the Aleutian Island for an adventure with backpacking. She does a good job describing the potential weather up there. So read the description and then contact Tanya so you know what you're getting yourself into. And then it's September. She'll go to Wyoming with some of you for the Wind Rivers Mountain. Another longish trip there with Tanya. So let's go. I just want to, Tony is in, where's Tony? South America? Tony's in Africa, wrong continent. Tony is in Africa. So I'll speak again the climbing school for her. It's the same as what we pitched last month. There will be 4 outings in April and May. It's $650 per student, but we still have 3 scholarships for people to apply to. So that's this year climbing school. Here's her email there, taylortrugman@gmail.com, if you're interested in the climbing school. And finally, if you're not a Mountaineers member yet, go for it. $15 individual, $20 for family membership to get announcement for all these trips and more. Lead your own trip, and if it's the first time and you may be a little intimidated, get one of us to co-lead with you. It's always nice to have a little help figuring it out for the first time. That's it for trips. So I think now I'll give it back to Jan to introduce our main speaker. Thanks, Jan.
Sure, thank you, Sylvie. So Anne is not here tonight again, so you're stuck with me. Anyway, it's my pleasure to introduce Martin. He has been, he has enjoyed climbing and backpacking since he was a child with his parents. He spent over 30 years around Los Alamos. He loves explore local canyons, but he also did some big trips covering New Zealand, Greenland, Nepal, I believe, but tonight he's here to speak about GR20, so please help me welcome Martin.
Okay, is this working? Okay. I guess I'll just put this away. Okay, thank you all for coming to my talk. The remote control, okay. Okay, so I'm here to talk about a trip I did to Corsica, which is in France, last July, and to do something called the Corsica GR20, one of the GR trails in Europe. Grande Randonnée is Great Walk, and they have a lot of those in Europe. And this is one of the more well-known ones in Europe, at least. And so that's at the trailhead, and then that's how the trail is marked on that side. Okay, so I'll say a little bit about the motivation for this is the previous year in 2023, I'd done something that's more well-known here called the Tour de Mont Blanc. That just goes all around the whole Mont Blanc Massif. You go through France, Italy, and Switzerland. So, and I thought, well, that was a lot of fun, but I'd like to do something a little more challenging than that. So, and also I'd never been to the Mediterranean area before, and I thought, okay, I'd like to go there also. So I started searching around online for difficult treks in that part of the world, and the GR20 was mentioned again and again. And the kind of things people said about it is on the right there. One of the top trails ever, supposedly the toughest trek. I figured, well, I'll find out. And everybody's saying spectacular, demanding, relentless, very difficult, crazy, all kinds of things. I don't know about that 175% dropout rate. I don't think that's true. And if you go into it seriously, as opposed to just, hey, I think I'll go give it a shot and then give up after a day or something. So I saw all that and I thought, well, that's it. That's where I'm going to go this summer. So in case anyone doesn't know, there's a map of on the left, you see where Corsica is located, right above the island of Sardinia, and it's a little closer to Italy, but Corsica is part of France. And although you can see a lot of Italian influence there on the island, especially in the food. So, and then a close up on the right, and where you fly in, at least where I flew in, is you can't really make it out too easily, but the city of, oops, wrong button. Yeah, the city of Bastia, just up there on the bottom of that peninsula to the north, and so that's where I flew in. Okay, so I actually did this as kind of a trip within a trip. I'd gone to the Mont Blanc area the year before and decided I'd like to go back and visit for a week. So the way I structured this actually was I did one itinerary to Geneva, which is easy access to the Chamonix area where Mont Blanc and the Tour de Mont Blanc is, and give myself a couple of days in Geneva. I was hoping to look around and maybe do a tour or something in Geneva. And from there flew down to Corsica. And so I had it kind of set up like that, and also give myself an extra couple of days in Geneva and then an extra day in Corsica in case there were any kind of delays or whatnot with the airlines. And it turned out they decided to leave my bag sitting in Chicago, bag full of trekking gear and all that. And it did not arrive while I was in Geneva, and did not arrive while I was waiting for the trek to start in Corsica. So I had to deal with that, but I was able to deal with it and do the trek as a minimalist, kind of. It was a bit stressful, but I managed. Anyway, and I decided I wanted a guided trip. It's a fairly long trail, and I like having a guide. You can pick his brain about, what's this trail about? Where exactly do we go? I've been known to make a few wrong turns when I'm by myself. The trail is mostly easily marked, well marked, but maybe not always everywhere. So I decided I want a guided trip, and I went with the same company I'd used for the Tour de Mont Blanc the previous year, KE Adventure, which is based in the UK. Okay, so brief itinerary and map, and then we'll get to photos. So the basic structure of the trip was that we met with the guide at the Bastia airport on the evening of July 6th, and we all transferred to another town in northern Corsica and stayed at a hotel, met all the other trekkers, and then started early the next morning. And it was 13 full days of trekking for the entire thing, just under 2 weeks. And with all of the campsite stays and the occasional sort of dorm-style room stays, all those nights arranged by the trekking company, as well as all meals, lunch, breakfast, dinner every day for the whole trek. So that was nice to have that all arranged. And there were 8 of us clients, 5 from the UK and 3 from the US. And a French guide, Patrick. So, and I want to point out that photo credits for the upcoming photos belong to everyone in the group. We all shared photos. And I didn't get them all in exact order. It was that somehow when we shared them, the time and date got lost. So I sort of was winging it here. Anyway, on the right, you see from one map I found online, they give more of a 16-day series of steps for the GR20, and we did it in 13 days. You can see approximately where it goes. You can do it north to south or south to north. Most people do it north to south, and that's how we did it. From the town of Calenzana in the north to Conca in the south. Okay, so there we are. That's the group. 8 of us, 4 women, 4 men. Again, 5 from the U.S. 5 from the UK, 3 from the U.S. There's Jeff, and then Debbie, and then I'm kind of kneeling beneath Debbie. I didn't want to stand in front of the sign. Lauren from New York City, Joe, Peter, Sarah, and Matt. So it was a great group. Really good group, strong group also. And so we started early that morning on it would be July 7th, began hiking. That's most of us, and then the guide is on the right there. And just part way up the mountain, it started out immediately with a long uphill through some rock scrambling and trees and so on. And we immediately got into country that looked like that. And it looked more or less like that for the whole trip. That's what the mountain range in Corsica looks like. Corsica is very mountainous, and the whole center of the island, all but the coast, is pretty much mountains that look like that. And we were constantly going through things that look like that. And so it's absolutely spectacular. Highly recommended if you like things like that. So up and up and up on the first day. Finally got up top there on the upper right. You can see the ocean that's looking west in the background. So we kind of come from the off from the upper right is where we started, and then we were up at the top at that point. And more of the view that we got immediately. And we had just come through all that to get a sense of what we're doing. And more or less the same picture with the wider angle lens. So we were very quickly doing things like this, starting on day one. They're going along a fairly narrow ledge, wasn't too steep, maybe 30, 45 degrees below us. So it was reasonably safe there, but it's a lot of rock scrambling like that. And then this was the very first night. What they have is every once in a while in the trek, you have these campsites and the tents are all preset. You can do it with bringing your own tent and everything and stay at the campground area. In fact, you're not supposed to camp in the wild there, although some people do. You're not supposed to. You're always supposed to camp at the campsites. But the trekking company arranged for all of us to have tents, so we didn't have to carry tents and didn't have to set them up. And then you don't see it in the photo, but there's a hut and kind of an area for eating and all that near there, as well as composting toilets and some running water and so on. So it's kind of nicely set up in that sense. And again, the trekking company for us arranged all this for us. And that was typical dinner fare every night. It was usually pasta. Again, it's France, but very influenced by Italy. And we'd want to fill up on energy for this. I usually gain a few pounds on trips because I eat well. On this one, I lost a few pounds, even eating a lot of stuff like this. And that's how many calories you expend on a hike like this. So it was typically pasta or something like that. Bread, there's always bread because it's France. So it was dinner. And then we started out the next day with more stuff like that almost immediately. So they're going along another ledge with more like a 50 or 60 degree drop off to our right, scrambling along there and getting steeper. And then finally getting to the point where there's just a 90 degree drop off to your right and you're just scrambling along. So there's no cables or anything there. You just kind of don't look to the right and focus on the handholds and try not to worry about it.
What are you carrying, Martin? You have to carry your sleeping bag and like day packs?
Yeah, day pack stuff, sleeping bag most of the time. There were about 4 places, maybe 5, on the entire time that we actually had road access. And if there were 2 road accesses in a row, you could give them your sleeping bag. That's what you carry in your main bag. And then they actually have a shuttle that goes around and delivers your main bag to the next place you get to that has road access. And that's the main bag that I didn't have because the airline left it in Chicago. It finally arrived in Geneva on the 10th or 11th. By that time, I'll talk about this a little later, but by that time I'd gone and bought some stuff and had a little tiny bag, so everybody had their big bag with changes of clothes, and I had this little tiny thing and was washing stuff every chance I got. So, but I made it work. So here's a relatively flat spot, one of very few on this trek. And then there we have, I think that was in the second night, there was an absolutely fantastic sunset. That's looking to the west, obviously. And behind us, there's a kind of a hut type of thing where they cooked us more pasta and more bread and all that. And you have to like pasta and bread if you go with that option. Sometimes like, I don't know, rice or quinoa or something like that. It was always very good and very filling, but kind of monotonous. So we all took pictures of the sunset. And then there's five of us, the three Yankees across the middle, and then a couple of people from the UK. So that's Lauren from New York City. Jeff is an American but living in the UK, and then me there, and then Matt and Sarah. So one nice thing about this trail, all along the trail, almost every day, there's at least one really good swimming hole, and we took advantage of it. The water was always a bit cold, is where you feel really cold getting in, and then it kind of gets tolerable. So really clear, nice water, and so we were going swimming a lot when we got the chance, and a good chance to rinse off. I mean, whatever you're wearing also. And that was also, I think, on maybe the third morning or thereabouts, coming across a bridge there. It's on the left. It's Sarah in front, and then me, and then Jeff and the guide on the right-hand side. And this photo is just showing there was sometimes a lot of color in the mountains. I don't know my plants very well, but it was colorful up there, and more of this very rugged scenery like this. And it was like this pretty much the whole trip, scenery like this. And another swimming hole. We spent quite a bit of time at this one, maybe half an hour, and we all got a swim in. So occasionally there was something like that we encountered. I'm not sure it was being used, but I think it's an old, maybe goats or something that they had in there. One thing we asked the guide at one point is, how did somebody come up with a trail like this? I mean, it seems sort of random. And he told us that if I understood correctly, he said the history of this trail is they wanted to make one of these GR, Great Walk trails in Corsica, but there was nothing coherent. So somebody went out there and just sort of stitched together a bunch of goat trails that had formed over the years, and that's the trail. So I guess they had some goats here at one point. And then we had an early start one morning, and there's Debbie taking photos of the nice reflection, and some of us there. And then it was up, a long way up, total rock scramble all to the top up there, up to a high path. So it was probably a few hours up there to the top, and just doing things like that and following the little red and white paint marks for this trail. And getting closer to the top, getting steeper. I think you can see from the top person up there, they had a cable or chain or something or other up there. And going along another ledge with another chain, nearing the top, I think. And then getting closer to the top. And then we finally made it to the top and had another fantastic view. That's Joe standing over there looking at the view. And then in the other direction, I'm enjoying the view down to these lakes. And that's another lake. I don't think it's the same as either of the lakes in the earlier picture. So partway down the trail, I think it's a little more to the north, you actually hit a paved road, and we stayed that night in this sort of dormitory style accommodation. And this is the official middle point between the north and the south parts of the GR20. Some people who do the trail will do the north one year and then the south separately, or the south and then the north separately. many people do the whole thing. Some people split it up like this. And another swimming hole. Debbie there was always the first to get in, no matter how cold the water was. And there's a relaxing spot next to some old stone houses there. And we all got a good rest at that point. And nice little stream, a little bit more swimming in that area, and a bridge there. This was another spot that had some road access. It wasn't a paved road, but a dirt road, and there were some pigs hanging around, and I think there were some dogs, and a little bit more of a restaurant type deal rather than the typical hut. And a really nice sunset at this one also. This is one of the few spots where it was kind of rolling hill type deal rather than rugged, jagged mountains. There wasn't much that looked like this. It was more jagged mountains. So like the next day, it was jagged mountains again, hiking in trails like that, and then making our way up these chains and cables and so on. And more swimming with Debbie in the water first, as was always the case. And then this day it was long downhill, down this steep gully, rock scrambling. And then since we went down all that, we had to go up something also. And I think there were chains in that thing to the right. So we were all waiting there for our turn to scramble up that thing. And there we are at another of the campsites. I don't think this one had road access, and sometimes the hut area, quote unquote, was really a fairly nice building, and they'd sell a few items in there. I mean, they'd have maybe poles or something in case your poles broke, and sunscreen, that kind of basic things, as well as you could always buy food, candy bars, basic things, maybe chips or something, even though we always got fed at these places because the trekking company had arranged for that. And then the next day we're back to steep down, steep up, and so on. There was a long, steep descent. And, looking at that picture on the left, you can imagine what it's like hiking and terrain like that. Absolutely everybody, including the guide, had scrapes and bruises by the end. I mean, you just slip on stuff like that because the rocks are loose. So we're all slipping and so on. And sometimes, like on the right, it's steeper, but a little bit more solid. And more steep downhill, sort of climbing down and going down a steep gully. And there's a nice picture of 6 of the people in the group. That's the guide Patrick on the right, and then some of the trekkers. That was one of the nicer campsites, or it could have been at one of the places with road access. I don't remember for sure. So that was a typical deal for filling up your water. And sometimes they said, like, this one supposedly was clean water, but I treated mine with pills anyway, because the cow was like licking the pipe there. So, and a few people in our group did get a stomach bug or something at one of the places, and then were, kind of sick for a couple of days, which is, you don't want that on a trip like this, but they managed. I mean, we were a pretty strong group, and I tried to play it safe, and I always put some tablets in the water. So Piers at another site, the picture on the left, I thought that was a nice bit of shadows that cover over that area was was giving there. That was after a long day, and they had these nice sort of padded benches, and we spent a lot of time sitting there. On the right, that's not our group in the background, but the main purpose of the photo was, you can't really tell from the photo, but this one place served these absolutely massive chunks of pasta. It was pasta, of course, but these things were like 3 times the normal amount of pasta that a person would eat. And even being as hungry as we were, we said, okay, give me a half portion or something when we saw the size of these things. So somebody took that picture. The group in back that was a different group. We saw them on most of the trek. I think the person in front left was their guide, because our guide was always interacting with her. But yeah, different group. And anyway, well, after filling up in the pasta, we were ready to go, running around on cliffs again. And so there we are, the next day going up another cliff. This is a spot that I think there were some tents there, but we just stopped there and got some lunch, and you could buy candy bars and so on. And at this spot and a couple others, there were dogs hanging around. They were always very friendly, so a couple of us were petting a dog there in the center. Super friendly dogs. They're probably given food by people. And there's a tree that I've seen many pictures online of that tree. And there we are. I think that's in the morning, actually, and we're hiking up out of this campsite. And then more steep downhills that day, and yet another steep downhill, and then steep uphill to make up for the downhill. But the rewards at the top are like that. And there we're approaching another campsite. The usual deal, all the tents were set up for us, and we were able to get food that evening and also buy things if we needed them. So that was a typical tent setup. This particular site was interesting. These platforms that the tent set on were, at this site, they were kind of rickety, and every time somebody stood up or moved around in bed, you could just feel the thing. It was like being in a boat. And so, I mean, they weren't, I don't think they were about to collapse. It didn't feel that bad, but I mean, they were bouncy. And another swimming hole that we spent some time in. So there's 5 of us and the guide at another stop. I think that was just a stop for lunch somewhere. And then running around on cliffs again, which the concept of cliffs, I mean, it applied every single day. We were doing something, going way up, going way down, or usually both of the above. Now, this is probably the most astounding picture in the whole group, because there was like 2 miles of flat trail. I mean, I couldn't believe it. 2 miles of flat trail. Just, you don't see that elsewhere on this trek. And here we're doing another steep downhill to the camping area. You could usually see those well in advance because you'd be way up in a mountain and you'd see these little tiny tents and little tiny people and so on down there. And there we're up close to the end of the trek, up at a pass, just relaxing there. We typically do a longer lunch, maybe 20, 30 minutes, and then a couple of 10-minute breaks. But we tried to keep a good pace most of the days. The the guide likes to get us in as early as possible, probably, because they're just anticipating if there's any problem, you want to get in early and just don't dawdle on the trip. But sometimes we got a good chance to rest.
How many miles was it between huts? How many miles were you hiking in a day?
We were averaging it was between 9 and 10, so not huge, but I have some stats later, but typically 9 to 10. And the issue wasn't so much distance, it was the terrain. It's that distance on that terrain. And we did encounter some people who were having some trouble. I mean, we saw some people limping. We saw people with makeshift stuff wrapped around their knees, people with their ankles wrapped up. At one point, we ran across there was an Italian guy who he seemed to be in kind of bad shape, really bad sunburn, and he was dehydrated. Lauren had some extra water and got him filled up on water, and then there was a hut about a quarter mile away, so he was able to get there. But it's the ruggedness of the trail, not the distance. And then there we are at the end. That's the official end of the trail. There's a little snack bar there. We didn't get any tobacco, but we did get some ice cream at another place. And you can kind of tell if you look closely, that was a very hot, long, humid day. And we were all completely soaked from head to toe in just sweat. Our clothes were wet. It was like we had just jumped in the water, salt water. We were all very tired and hot and exhausted, but there we are at the end of the whole thing.
So was it usually pretty warm, or most of the days was it?
It was, I'd say, a little bit warmer than normal, but we did get up to, the highest point was maybe 8,500 feet or something, and it could be a little cool in the evenings. I'd put on the fleece or something in the evenings sometimes. Towards the beginning and end, when we're down lower, we kept going up and down, but it was really at the end, both ends of it, that we were almost at sea level. So here's Debbie had a GPS, and she took all of these for each of the 13 days. So as you can see, the sort of basic stats here, 13 full days in the trail, 12 nights, little over 120 miles in total. So that's where the figure of 9 to 10 miles a day comes in over 13 days. And a little bit more elevation gain than loss just because of the difference in altitude at the beginning and end. So probably averaging about 3,500 a day or something. So not huge, but not trivial either for 13 days in a row. And you can see the mileage was, and the times that we spent varied a lot from one day to the next. So, and actually looking at some of these days here, like look for example at days 2, 3, and 4. On those days we only did about 5, 4, and 6 miles respectively, but look at how much time it took. Going 5 miles took 7.5 hours on day 2. Going 4 miles took over 6 hours on day 3, and that's a statement of what the terrain was like. The longest day was day 9 down in the lower left. It was between 18 and 19 miles, and it took us almost 11 hours. We left it I think 6 that morning and didn't get in until pushing 5 o'clock in the afternoon. After a long day of hiking, between 13 and 14 the previous day, and it took us close to 11 hours on the trail. So let's see, that's the end of the photos. And so after we were done, I started thinking, okay, is this the hardest trek in Europe. Well, as I say there, I haven't done every trek in Europe, so I wouldn't know. Obviously, you could go somewhere and just sort of make up something and, oh, let's go up that mountain, do this, do that, and you could make something that's harder. Maybe this is the hardest sort of standard named trail there. I don't know. I think that, I mean, the daily mileage and elevation gain and loss was not excessive. And I think that it's probably the terrain that makes people say this was very difficult. But I happen to like terrain like that, and I've done a lot of it with the mountaineers here, rugged terrain, rock scrambling, and so on. So I like that aspect of it. And I could see that some of the people on the trail were not really that familiar with that. If you just like hiking flat, sort of sidewalk type things, you wouldn't like this. So let's see, over in the right, I already said something about luggage, but yeah, so I got to Geneva first in the first airline itinerary and thought, okay, I have 2 days here before I fly to Corsica. Luggage wasn't there. And, the Swiss have a reputation for being very efficient and so on. And no, not in this case. They had no idea where the luggage was. And even though the luggage is supposed to be scanned and everything nowadays, they couldn't say where it was. And they were saying maybe it was in Munich because I'd come from Munich, and they said a lot of luggage was sitting out in the tarmac, and there was terrible weather and so on. And then the guy started saying it's in Orlando, which didn't make any sense because I didn't go anywhere close to Orlando. I went to Chicago first, and I finally realized he thought that the airport code ORD was Orlando. In fact, that's Chicago O'Hare. So he thought, okay, maybe it's sitting in Chicago, and ultimately nobody knew. And I tried making phone calls, and it's the usual deal. You can hardly get a hold of a human nowadays when you call. And then to complicate things, even though I told my banks and everyone that, okay, I'm going to be traveling, if my credit card shows a charge over here, it's not somebody stole my card. But I had 2 cards stop working and then tried calling them, and then I get these phone systems that just take you in circles, so I couldn't figure out what was wrong with them. And I have what I took in the airplane and not my main bag, with changes of clothes, with sleeping bag, which is a little too bulky that I wanted to take it on the airplane. Trekking poles, you got to put them in your checked luggage. So I was missing a few things, and I don't have a huge amount of cash in me, and my cards are starting to not work. So I was thinking, okay, can I save this trip? And anyway, well, fortunately, so I got down to Corsica, and fortunately, I'd given myself an extra day there. I never like to cut it close with these trips. I'll always arrive like the day before or 2 days before. And I was glad I did that because the hotel that I stayed at in Corsica, I got to the hotel, really nice hotel, and I was talking to the person at the front desk, which was one of the owners, and telling her I wasn't going to do the GR20 or was going to do it, but a bunch of my trekking gear is gone. And she makes a phone call and is talking to somebody for a while in French, and I don't speak much French. And then she says, okay, he'll be here in 30 minutes. And who's going to be here? What? And then she's like, oh, well, this guy, he's like Uber or something, and for 70 euros, he'll take you to a sporting goods store, give you an hour there, and drive you back. It's about 25 minutes drive. I thought, well, okay, I'll see if this will work. But, I was thinking, okay, I had to buy a sleeping bag, trekking poles, all my fleece I had put in the main bag, and my rain gear I'd put in the main bag, and I needed a duffel bag and maybe some light, flip-flops or something to wear around camp, maybe another thing or two, I can't remember. And I thought, you go to a place like REI or whatever, and those things can easily cost a few $100. And I got these cards that aren't working, And if I put in my last working card and try to buy this, is it going to fail and then that card is shut down and then I can't contact the bank and then I'm like dead in the water. So I was thinking, well, I don't think this is going to work, but I'll give it a shot. And it worked ultimately. So yeah, so, and I'll say a little bit about that here. So, but I want to give special thanks to the trekking company KE Adventure, the UK based. They arranged everything, and they also did some legwork to try to figure out the luggage deal, but didn't have any luck, but neither did I. And then they sort of connected us with this local guiding service. I guess they all kind of collaborate, called Corsica Adventure, and that was where the guide, Patrick, came from. I think they did some checking around with the luggage too, but couldn't locate it. And then the third place, the hotel, spa, restaurant, LAM Business, that's where I stayed, and the proprietor called this Uber or taxi or whatever he was, who took me to this shop. Took me to a place called Intersport, which is they seem to be a big sort of sporting goods store in Europe. It's not specifically for hiking and so on. It's more of a, think like a Big Five sporting goods type of deal, where they've got stuff for ball games and other things. But they had what I needed. You know, I was able to get a sleeping bag. You can get that anywhere. I got fleece and got some basic rain gear, just slightly above the level of putting a plastic garbage sack over myself. But, you know, I mean, it felt pretty flimsy. I didn't end up needing it. We got good weather. And the salesperson, I mean, she spoke very little English. I spoke very little French, but we used a speech-to-text app on the phone and communicated. And she was super helpful, taking me around. And the one surprising thing, so I'm on this little island, Corsica, that has all sorts of sporting type stuff going on, mountains and so on. And I'm in a little town, and I was thinking, okay, a few $100 minimum for this stuff, guaranteed. And I couldn't believe it in that store. So, you know, she shows me the trekking poles, like €7.99 a piece. What? Like as opposed to 200 or something that I'd pay around here. Sleeping bag, €35. I couldn't believe it. You know, I got this very fleece vest that I'm wearing for, I don't know, €25 or something. The rain gear for comparable to that. Yeah, a couple other things. And I asked at the beginning about, before I knew the prices, I said, can I get any kind of discount if I buy a bunch of stuff? And they said, we can't do that, sorry. Then they said 10%, you know, when they heard my story and all. And then later they said 20%. Then I got to the counter and they said, for you, 30%. And I ended up paying like €92, which is a little over $100 for all of this stuff. It was, I mean, it was unbelievable. And I still had minimal stuff. I mean, I had like 2 pairs of hiking appropriate shirts and 1 pair of socks. Lauren ended up giving me an extra pair so I could swap them out. I mean, one pair of wool socks for 13 days, you're going to get kind of pancaked and useless. So I had 2 pairs of socks and could clean them, you know, swap them out each day. And then just washed my hiking trousers every day in the water. There was water everywhere. So I made it work without my main bag, and it all worked out. And everybody in the trip had a great time, and we all made it. No real problems, and it was a fantastic group, really good group. And I guess that does it. They did, and yeah, the question was, did they ever find my bag? They did. I think it was on July 10th or 11th, when I was in the middle of the trek, that they got the bag to Geneva. and they offered to send it down to Corsica, but I thought, well, you know, we're changing location every day. Most places have no car access. The places that did have car access, the guide would always go to somebody and say, okay, you're going to be over there or something. Your group goes there, your group goes there. And I just thought, you know, if I tell them to send it down to one of these places, I could be here, my bag could be 100 feet away, and I wouldn't know it's there. And it's just it's gonna disappear forever if we try to send it down here, I thought. So I just said, you know, just leave the bag at the Geneva airport. And then I got a funny email from the baggage people saying, your hockey stick is in Geneva. I thought hockey stick, is that like European slang for a piece of luggage? You know, a piece of luggage has got the thing that pulls out and then the luggage kind of sticks out, maybe vaguely shaped like a hockey stick. So I thought, okay, that's slang or something. When I got back to Geneva after the trip, you know, I showed them the thing and said, okay, my luggage is supposed to be here. And they said, oh, so are you a hockey player? No. This was the same guy who thought ORD was Orlando. So, no, it's not a hockey stick. It's a duffel bag. And then, well, I'm not sure we have that. And we looked around in these piles of luggage, and then finally I find it there. So it was, I mean, this whole luggage thing was, it was stressful and just kind of, I mean, I can look back at it and laugh, but it was pretty stressful at the time. I thought the trip was over when I got there without it. And if I hadn't had the help of these people at the hotel and this shop that gave me a really good price in these things, the whole thing would have been a bust. But instead, it was a huge success. Yes?
Martin, I don't know if you had travel insurance, and this would not have helped with the credit card issue, but we were trekking one time on the north coast of England on the North Sea side, and our luggage did not arrive. And we were quite fortunate because we had travel insurance, and there's a North Face store in Edinburgh. So $1,500 later, we were able to pursue our trek, and the travel insurance covered those expenses. So for people who are planning on traveling, you know, sometimes it seems a little excessive travel insurance, but it can pay off.
Yeah. And I did have travel insurance, but ultimately I decided it wasn't worth the effort. I mean, you know, $100 and then some extra for the Uber guy or whatever he was to take me there. It just wasn't worth the hassle of filling out all the forms and so on. And I mean, I didn't have a receipt for the Uber guy, or he was maybe just a friend of the hotel person, so I don't know. I didn't have a receipt, and I got some decent gear for $100, so I decided not worry about it. It wasn't $1,500, fortunately. If it had been that, then my last card would have shut down. And, you know, I called the credit card and you get this, you know, this computer voice, and I'm trying to figure out why didn't my card work? And the voice comes back and says, the card was declined. Yes, the card was declined. Why was it declined? Did it shut down, or is there some other thing that's going on? Yes, your card was declined. I mean, yeah, AI. AI is not intelligent. It's not a substitute for a human. So it all worked out, though.
Is there wildlife there, and did you see any?
We saw some goats. I mean, wild goats, not in the pens. Oh yeah. So the question was, did we see any wildlife? So yeah, I mean, the domestic pigs, that doesn't really count, and some wild goats. That's the major wildlife we saw. There were maybe little animals, little furry, I don't know, marmot type things or whatever. I'm not sure. Oh, well, we saw birds, yeah. Yeah. I don't know my birds, but yeah, flying birds. Um, and yeah, some of the trees were interesting. That the pine trees, where you can see it's a different sort of style of pine tree than what we have around here. I don't know what they are, but this Mediterranean style of plants and trees.
What was the highest elevation?
What was the highest elevation? The highest was, I don't know exactly, it was about 8,500 feet or so. The high point, I think, is somewhere between 8,500 and 9,000. And we were actually really close to the high point. It looked like it was maybe 20 minutes, kind of a rock scramble off from a pass we were at. And I really tried to persuade the guide to let me run over there, and he just said, no, we can't do that. He didn't want to take the whole group over there, so, well.
All right, we'll switch gears. I'll read a couple from online. First question, were sleeping pads already set up in the tents?
Were sleeping pads already set up in the tents? Yes. Yeah, they were nice. Sometimes they were really nice, thick sleeping pads, sometimes thinner ones. Sometimes they'd give us an extra because maybe one of the tents wasn't occupied that night. So we didn't have to carry sleeping bags. We did carry sleeping bags, but tents and pads, no.
Okay, next. Did you find it crowded on the trail and at campsites, or were you mostly only with your group?
It wasn't what I would call crowded. So should I repeat that question? Okay, so it wasn't crowded, but it wasn't exactly what I'd call a wilderness experience either. It was distinctively less crowded than the Tour de Mont Blanc that I'd done a year prior, but we saw several groups. There were always other people every day that we'd see, other groups that appeared to be guided, and then sometimes smaller groups, or even individuals. So it wasn't crowded. I mean, it wasn't so crowded as to be unpleasantly so, but wasn't really. Like I said, it wasn't really a wilderness experience either. And at the campsites, yeah, there were more people hanging around, but it wasn't excessive.
And you may have answered this one after it was typed, but what were the day and night high and low temperatures?
Good question. I don't think I'll be able to give you a number. The coldest night was the very first night. We had gone up pretty high, and it could have been, in Fahrenheit, it could have been 40-ish or something that night. I remember feeling a little cold, and this was a bag. I bought sort of the minimal sleeping bag because I had to buy a bag. And I was slightly cold, although I could have just put on my fleece and taken care of that. And then after that, I found it was sometimes a bit hot during the day. It could have been 60s, even 70s Fahrenheit. The very last day, as we were getting close down to the ocean again, it was very hot and very humid, as you might remember from that picture right there, where you can look at us. Those clothes are soaked top to bottom.
Okay, you said the trail was made from goat paths originally. Have switchbacks been added in any of the areas?
Sometimes there were switchbacks. Sometimes it was just up a long rocky slope. It varied a lot.
Okay, I think that's it that I'm seeing online. Is there any more questions from the in-person audience in here? Oh,
Yes.
One up front.
Martin, I think I saw you wear gloves in one picture. Were you the only one with gloves? It's like that everybody should have gloves.
Yeah, I can't recall who else was wearing gloves, or if they. Yeah, I always have these gloves in my pack, just kind of rubberized, and more for grabbing the trekking poles than anything else. And usually I don't use trekking poles. Most people who've been hiking with me probably or may have noticed, I don't usually use hiking poles, but in this I wanted to be sure I had them because it was 13 days of a lot of up and down. So I bought these $7.99, or maybe it was $8.99 a piece trekking poles. I thought for sure they'd be broken by the end, but they held up. Yeah, so yes, Bill.
So how helpful was the guide vis-a-vis being a taskmaster and just driving you forward?
He was, yeah, so how helpful was the guide versus just being a taskmaster and leading us forward? So, I mean, he was mostly pleasant, and mostly, and wait, what was that? Oh yeah, I'd have to find the photo with him in it. He was mostly friendly. He did make a few phone calls to try to help with the bag situation, but really nobody was able to solve the bag situation. He was, he would get to the campsites and he would go set everything up and then come back and talk to us. Okay, you two go in that tent, you two in that tent. He'd tell us when to come to dinner and all that. So I thought he was helpful, and also for the people who needed any help with the rock scrambling, he was always there to give them a hand and so on. He actually came up to me and kind of privately one day and said, "Can you stop running around in the rocks because you're misleading other people?" So that's okay. I was running around a little too much because I like doing that, but he said it nicely, but he said, yeah, just kind of let me handle that. So, okay. But he was fine. I thought he was a good guide. Did his job, did it efficiently, and the whole group did fine. So we gave him a nice tip, I think like $100 a piece or something at the end.
All right.
Any other questions?
We'll keep watching both in here and if anybody's typing into the chat. But okay, if those are all the questions, thank you again, Martin, for sharing your Corsica trip with us. Thank you. Everyone, please remember to watch out for that quick survey coming to your email, and do check out the Peak and Mountaineers websites for some great programming coming up this winter and into the spring. Thanks everybody for joining us this evening, and have a good night.